And in that prior chapter, Yogananda describes his experiences with the sleepless saint, Ram Gopal. In fact, that chant that we sang of "What lightning flash," I don't know if this is true or not, but I always hold the experiences that Yogananda had, as he describes, with Ram Gopal, of these flashing lights. I don't know if that chant speaks to that, but I have always equated that. But Yogananda went to the Himalayas because he wanted this divine sight, and he thought Ram Gopal and the Himalayas, being in those mountains, would give it to him. Now, Ram Gopal was a realized saint, and he immediately knew, no. In fact, in not so many words, I'm going to paraphrase here. He says, "What the heck are you doing here? Your guru is waiting for you in his ashram. He's the one who can give you divine sight. I can't." And he describes how he's not ready for that because the megawatts of electricity that would come through him would melt the wires of his being, which is something that Yogananda talks about in a later reading, a later week, that we all are building to strengthen ourselves so that we can withstand that divine power. So Ram Gopal sends Yogananda back, and he goes back, returns to the ashram. And he returns sort of sheepishly, expecting Sri Yukteswar to be disappointed. And what Yogananda is met with again, or really, I'm kind of going backwards in time, not for the first time, but he experiences divine love. And as Yogananda describes it, in a way that he had never understood before. Sri Yukteswar says, "I have no conditions. I don't hold any expectations of you." This is the true meaning of divine love, true unconditional love. He just wants it for Yogananda. This sense of divine love flowing from Sri Yukteswar, regardless of how stern he looks there in that picture on the right, doesn't matter. That divine love is present. Yogananda was ready for it. He opened his heart for it. He was able to, in that sense, recognize it and return that love, which is what allowed Sri Yukteswar to sense from the divine and give him that divine sight by returning to the ashram again and again, physically, but also spiritually, returning to that ashram in his heart. These are two very, very important lessons for all of us, especially those of us who are on a spiritual path, have taken a vow of discipleship to a guru, whether it's Yogananda or whoever. Be willing to repeatedly keep returning to the ashram, repeatedly open my heart to that experience of divine love, recognize it as best I can, share it with all who I meet. Most of us were not born on a spiritual path. Maybe a few of you in this room were, but I know I wasn't. I spent many decades quite the opposite, rebelling against a spiritual path. Even as I married someone who was on a spiritual path, found these teachings, went very deep with them, I still was like, yeah, no. So I wasn't even thinking about returning to the ashram. But there's another point here of what I was doing and what all of us have done in various ways, everybody in the world does, which is the soul wants to return. The soul wants to experience that divine sight, that soul sight. Now, I didn't know that. I wasn't recognizing that. I didn't consciously think that. So we find other ways, as I was doing, find other ways to feel satisfied, to feel that happiness. But ultimately, we're just on that roller coaster of suffering and happiness, that security seeking through the bank account, through the job, through the house, through the loving partner, through the friends, through the whatever, all of those things that are external to us. Eventually, in this lifetime or in whatever lifetime, we get to the point of, that's just not working for me. It's not that, in my case, I had a bad life. I had a very good life, but it wasn't ultimately satisfying in this way. And I was able to make the declaration, I want a spiritual life. I want to be very conscious of it. And it was very soon after that that I had my own experience of Yogananda. And this is the other thing that Yogananda is describing in these words here. Something that I think is necessary, and many of you have experienced this as disciples of Yogananda, as disciples of any great guru, which is it is a very personal relationship. many of us who are disciples of Yogananda will recognize that personal nature of it, even though it's individual for each one of us, whatever that means. That individual part of the relationship is really part and parcel of that divine love, to being able to accept and feel that divine love. But we have to get there.